Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, watching the stars through the main viewport. 3 years had passed since Earth launched its first deep space exploration mission, and Jake never imagined they would find anything like this. The massive alien structure floating in the void near Kepler 442 was easily 10 times larger than any human ship ever built. The Discovery had been scanning the system for potential colony worlds when their sensors detected the enormous vessel. Jake ordered his crew to maintain distance while they tried to understand what they were looking at. The ship appeared to be made of some kind of dark metal that absorbed most of their scanner beams. Lieutenant Ben Parker ran the sensor station, and his readings showed the alien vessel contained thousands of life forms. The ship design was unlike anything in human databases, with curved sections that seemed to flow into each other like water. Strange energy signatures pulsed along its hull in patterns that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. Communications Officer Lisa. Warner picked up radio signals coming from the alien ship. The signals were clearly artificial but used frequencies and modulation patterns that human technology had never encountered. Lisa worked for hours trying to decode the transmissions while Jake debated whether to make contact. The decision was taken away from them when 3 smaller alien ships appeared from behind an asteroid. These vessels moved with impossible grace through space using some form of propulsion that left no visible exhaust trail. Within minutes, they had surrounded the Discovery and were transmitting what could only be demands for surrender. Jake ordered red alert as his crew prepared for the worst. The alien ships were sleek and deadly-looking, with weapon ports that glowed with dangerous energy. Chief Engineer Rick Hayes reported that their shields were functioning, but he had no idea how effective they would be against alien technology. The standoff lasted 2 hours before the alien ships opened a communication channel. The translation came through as broken English mixed with mathematical symbols that suggested these beings had been studying human transmissions for some time. The message was simple and terrifying. The aliens identified themselves as representatives of the Valdris Empire and demanded that Jake surrender his ship immediately. They claimed that humanity had entered restricted space without permission and must face judgment from the Galactic Federation. Jake tried to explain that humans had no knowledge of any galactic government or restricted territories. The Valdris commander, who called himself Zefak, appeared on their main screen. His reptilian features were covered in scales that shifted color as he spoke, and his eyes held no warmth or compassion. Zefak explained that the Federation had ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years, and no species was permitted to develop space travel without their approval. Jake felt his blood run cold as Zefak continued speaking. Humanity had been observed for decades, and the Federation had decided that humans were too dangerous to exist as a free species. Earth would be conquered, and the human population would serve as slaves for more worthy races. Admiral Lisa Carter arrived on the bridge just as Zefak was making his demands. She had been sleeping when the red alert sounded, but quickly understood the situation. Lisa took over communications and tried to negotiate with the alien commander, using every diplomatic skill she possessed. Zefak seemed amused by Lisa's attempts at peaceful resolution. He explained that the Federation had conquered over 200 species and none had ever successfully resisted their technology and military might. Humanity would join the ranks of slave races or face complete extinction. Lisa refused to accept either option and demanded to speak with higher authorities in the Federation. She pointed out that humanity had never harmed any alien species and deserved a chance to prove they could coexist peacefully. Her words seemed to fall on deaf ears as Zefak laughed at what he called human arrogance. The situation escalated when sensors detected a human colony ship approaching the system. The vessel contained 50,000 civilians, including families, with children who were heading to establish a new settlement on one of the planets. Jake immediately tried to warn them away, but it was too late. Zefak saw the colony ship as a perfect opportunity to demonstrate Federation power. He ordered his ships to intercept the civilian vessel and prepared to destroy it as an example of what happened to species that defied the Valdris Empire. Lisa begged him to reconsider, but the alien commander was determined to make his point. The colony ship tried to flee when they realized what was happening, but the civilian vessel was no match for military spacecraft. Within minutes, the Valdris ships had disabled the colony ship's engines and were preparing to fire their main weapons. Jake watched in horror as thousands of innocent lives hung in the balance. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He ordered the Discovery to ram the lead Valdris ship at maximum speed while firing every weapon they possessed. Alien Commander was so surprised by this suicidal attack that his shields failed to activate in time. The Discovery crashed into the Valdris vessel with tremendous force, sending both ships spinning through space. The impact damaged both vessels severely, but Jake's desperate gamble had saved the colony ship from immediate destruction. Emergency. Alarms blared throughout the Discovery as the crew struggled to regain control. Chief Engineer Rick Hayes reported massive damage to their hull and engine systems. Life support was failing in several sections, and they had lost most of their weapons in the collision. The Valdris ship was in similar condition, but its superior technology allowed faster repairs. Jake knew they could not win a prolonged battle against superior alien technology, but he refused to surrender while civilian lives were at stake. He ordered his crew to prepare for boarding action and armed every person on the ship with whatever weapons they could find. If they were going to die, they would make the aliens pay for every life lost. The Discovery's desperate attack had accomplished something unexpected. Other human ships in the system had detected the battle and were moving to assist. Captain Amy. Rodriguez arrived with 2 escort frigates and immediately engaged the remaining Valdris vessels. Her aggressive tactics confused the aliens who had never encountered such reckless courage. The battle that followed would be remembered as humanity's first victory against impossible odds. Using damaged ships and improvised weapons, the human crews managed to disable all 3 Valdris vessels and rescue the civilians. The cost was high, with many brave souls lost, but they had proven that humans would never surrender without a fight. As rescue teams worked to save survivors from both sides, Jake realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they had made powerful enemies who controlled an entire galaxy. The war for human survival was just beginning, and the outcome would determine whether humanity joined the stars as free beings or slaves to alien masters. General Marcus Webb received the emergency transmission from the Kepler sector while reviewing battle plans in his Earth Command Center. The message from Captain Jake Morrison was brief but terrifying. Humanity had made contact with a hostile alien empire that controlled the entire galaxy and demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Marcus had spent 30 years preparing Earth's military for unknown threats, but nothing could have prepared him for this scale of enemy. The Valdris Empire commanded thousands of worlds and possessed technology that made human weapons look like stone tools. Every military advisor told him that resistance was hopeless. The general ignored their pessimistic assessments and began mobilizing every available warship for immediate departure to the Kepler sector. If humanity was going to face extinction, then they would meet their fate with weapons in hand. Marcus had studied every major war in human history and knew that superior technology did not always guarantee victory. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez was already in space when she received orders to join the relief fleet heading to Kepler. Her fighter squadron had been conducting training exercises near Mars when the alert came through. Amy was known throughout the fleet for her unconventional tactics and willingness to attempt maneuvers that other pilots considered impossible. The journey to the Kepler sector took 6 days at maximum warp speed. During the trip, Marcus studied every piece of data that Captain Morrison had transmitted about Valdris technology and combat methods. The alien ships were faster and more heavily armed than anything humanity possessed, but they seemed to follow predictable patterns in battle. Amy spent the journey developing new fighter tactics based on what she learned about alien combat doctrine. The Valdris appeared to favor long-range engagements using energy weapons that could punch through any known armor. Their ships moved in rigid formations that maximized firepower, but limited maneuverability. Dr. Kevin Walsh joined the expedition as the fleet's chief xenobiologist. His job was to study any alien prisoners they might capture and learn about their psychology and weaknesses. Kevin had spent years studying animal behavior and suspected that military tactics might reveal important information about alien thinking patterns. The relief fleet arrived at Kepler 442 to find the system in chaos. Valdris reinforcements had arrived and were systematically hunting down human ships throughout the sector. Several civilian vessels had been destroyed and hundreds of lives were already lost. Marcus knew they had to act quickly. Before the situation became even worse, the first major engagement occurred near the fourth planet where a damaged human freighter was trying to escape 3 Valdris patrol ships. Amy led her fighter squadron in a desperate rescue attempt that shocked both human and alien observers. Instead of following standard attack patterns, she ordered her pilots to use the planet's gravity well as a weapon. Amy's fighters dove toward the planet's surface at maximum speed with the Valdris ships in pursuit. At the last possible moment, she ordered her squadron to fire their engines at full power and use the gravity assist to slingshot around the planet. The maneuver sent them racing past the alien ships at incredible velocity, while firing every weapon they possessed. The Valdris commanders had never seen anything like this suicidal attack pattern. Their ships were designed for careful long-range combat, not the chaotic close-quarters fighting that humans seemed to prefer. 2 alien vessels were destroyed before they could adapt to these impossible tactics. Their general, Marcus, watched the battle from his command ship and realized that Amy had discovered something important about their enemies. The Valdris were excellent warriors when fighting according to established rules, but they struggled to adapt when faced with completely unexpected tactics. Human unpredictability might be their greatest weapon. Dr. Kevin Walsh studied recordings of the battle and noticed something interesting about Valdris behavior patterns. The alien ships always maintained perfect formation, even when it put them at a tactical disadvantage. They seemed incapable of independent thinking and followed orders without question or creativity. The next engagement proved Kevin's theory correct. When Marcus divided his fleet into small independent groups that attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, each group used different tactics and weapons, making it impossible for the Valdris to develop effective countermeasures. The aliens found themselves fighting 6 different battles at once. Amy's fighters became famous throughout the fleet for their willingness to attempt maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. Her pilots would deliberately fly through asteroid fields using the floating rocks as cover and weapons. They rammed enemy fighters when their ammunition ran out and somehow survived impacts that should have killed them. The sight of human pilots laughing while flying directly into enemy fire became a source of terror among Valdris crews. The aliens could not understand how any species could find joy in such dangerous situations. Their own warriors were trained to be efficient and disciplined, but never showed emotion during combat. Dr. Kevin made another crucial discovery when he examined wreckage from destroyed Valdris ships. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also completely standardized across their entire fleet. Every ship used identical weapon systems and followed the same tactical programming. This uniformity was their weakness. Marcus began exploiting this weakness by constantly changing human battle tactics. Just when the Valdris adapted to one strategy, the humans would switch to something completely different. The aliens found themselves always one step behind an enemy that refused to fight. According to any logical pattern, the turning point came during the Battle of Kepler Station, where Marcus used what became known as chaos warfare. Human ships attacked in seemingly random patterns while Amy's fighters performed impossible aerobatics that confused enemy targeting systems. The Valdris formation collapsed under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not predict. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Valdris fleet was forced to retreat from a battlefield. The survivors transmitted desperate reports to their homeworlds describing human warriors who seemed to enjoy the chaos of battle. The very concept of finding pleasure in combat was alien to their disciplined military culture. Amy's squadron pursued the retreating Valdris ships and demonstrated another uniquely human trait. When they found alien survivors floating in escape pods, the human pilots stopped fighting and began rescue operations. The sight of enemies helping their defeated foes shocked every Valdris witness and created the first cracks in their unified hatred of humanity. General Marcus realized that they had won more than just a single battle. They had proven that humanity could not be easily conquered, and that human methods of warfare were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The real war was just beginning, but Earth now had a chance to survive. Admiral Tony Mitchell stood in the command center of the UES Freedom, watching the tactical display that showed the final Valdris fleet trapped in the Sigma Draconis system. 3 months of brutal warfare had led to this moment, where humanity held the power to destroy their enemies completely. The alien ships were damaged and running low on ammunition with nowhere left to retreat. The battle had been the longest and bloodiest of the war, with both sides suffering terrible losses. Human ships floated dead in space alongside the wreckage of Valdris vessels. Thousands of brave souls from both species had died in the fighting, and Tony knew that many more would follow if the violence continued. Commander Sarah Kim approached the Admiral with casualty reports from the latest engagement. The numbers were staggering, with over half the human fleet damaged and many ships barely able to maintain life support. The Valdris were in even worse condition, with most of their vessels showing critical system failures. Tony had spent the night studying intelligence reports about Valdris culture and military doctrine. Every piece of evidence suggested that these aliens would fight to the death rather than surrender. Their entire civilization was built around concepts of honor and superiority that made defeat unthinkable for their warrior. Dr. Helen Brooks worked frantically in the medical bay treating wounded soldiers from both sides of the conflict. She had been shocked to discover that Valdris physiology was similar enough to human biology that many medical treatments worked on both species. The alien prisoners seemed surprised that humans would waste resources helping their enemies. The breakthrough came when Helen was treating a severely injured Valdris officer named Krell, who had been pulled from a destroyed fighter. The alien was dying from internal injuries, and human medical technology was his only hope for survival. Helen worked for 6 hours to save his life, while other Valdris prisoners watched in amazement. Krell survived the operation and slowly began to recover from his wounds. During his treatment, he asked Helen why humans would help their enemies instead of allowing them to die. Helen explained that human medical ethics required her to help anyone who was suffering, regardless of which side they fought for. Admiral Tony received reports that similar scenes were playing out throughout the fleet as human medical teams treated alien wounded without discrimination. The Valdris prisoners could not understand this behavior, since their own culture viewed helping enemies as a sign of weakness and stupidity. The moment that changed everything occurred when Tony made a decision that shocked his entire crew. Instead of ordering the final attack that would destroy the remaining Valdris fleet, he opened a communication channel and offered them medical assistance for their wounded. The silence that followed lasted for nearly an hour. Valdris Fleet Commander Nexus finally responded with confusion and suspicion in his voice. He demanded to know what trick the humans were planning and why they would offer help to enemies who had killed thousands of their people. Tony simply stated that unnecessary death served no purpose and that both sides had suffered enough. The first Valdris medical transport that docked with the Freedom carried dozens of critically wounded aliens who needed immediate treatment. Dr. Helen and her team worked alongside Valdris medical officers to save as many lives as possible. The cooperation between former enemies amazed everyone involved. Commander Krell became an unofficial ambassador between the two species during his recovery. He spent hours talking with human medical staff and trying to understand their motivations for helping defeated enemies. Everything he learned contradicted what the Valdris had been taught about human nature and intentions. Tony proposed a temporary ceasefire to allow both fleets to recover their wounded and repair their ships. The offer was met with disbelief from Valdris commanders who had never encountered such behavior from any species they had conquered. Several alien officers suspected that this was some elaborate trap or psychological warfare tactic. The ceasefire lasted for 5 days, during which human and Valdris crews worked together to rescue survivors from damaged ships throughout the system. The sight of former enemies risking their lives to save each other began to change attitudes on both sides of the conflict. Dr. Helen discovered that many Valdris soldiers were questioning their orders and the justification for their war against humanity. These aliens had been told that humans were savage primitives who would torture and kill any prisoners they captured. The reality of human compassion was destroying their faith in Federation propaganda. Commander Krell requested permission to address his fellow prisoners and explain what he had learned about human behavior. His speech was recorded and transmitted throughout Valdris space, where it created controversy and debate among civilian populations who had never questioned their government's policies. The most powerful moment came when the young Valdris pilot Zara was rescued from a damaged fighter by human Marines. She had been trapped for 2 days with failing life support when Sergeant Mike Johnson risked his own life to cut through the wreckage and pull her to safety. Zara later testified that the human smiled at her, even though she had been trying to kill him hours earlier. Admiral Tony used the ceasefire to establish formal communication with the Galactic Federation Council. His message was simple but revolutionary. Humanity did not seek conquest or revenge but wanted to establish peaceful relations with all species in the galaxy. The Federation could choose cooperation or continued warfare. The response from Federation leadership was mixed, with some species calling for continued attacks, while others questioned whether humanity might actually be different from other conquered races. The debate that followed would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Commander Sarah Kim reported that several Valdris officers had requested asylum and wanted to defect to the human side. These aliens claimed that serving alongside humans had shown them a better way to live than the rigid military culture of their empire. Their testimonies would prove crucial in winning over other species. Dr. Helen published her medical findings about treating Valdris patients and shared the data with alien medical officers. This cooperation led to breakthrough treatments that saved lives on both sides and demonstrated the benefits of peaceful scientific exchange between species. The ceasefire officially ended when Valdris reinforcements arrived in the system, but the psychological impact of human mercy had already spread throughout their military. Many alien soldiers were no longer certain that humans were the monsters they had been told to fight. The seeds of doubt that Tony had planted would soon grow into something that would change the galaxy forever. Commander Rick Stone was studying star charts in his cabin aboard the UES Defiance when the emergency alert sounded throughout the ship. The message that followed sent chills through every human in the fleet. A new threat had emerged from the galactic rim that made their war with the Valdris Empire seem like a minor disagreement between neighbors. The Zephyrian Collective had arrived in Federation space with a fleet of bioships that defied every known principle of spacecraft design. These living vessels consumed entire planets to fuel their growth and reproduction. Within weeks, they had devoured 3 inhabited worlds and were spreading through the galaxy like a plague. Captain Laura Evans received desperate transmissions from Federation worlds begging for help against the Zephyrian invasion. The same alien species that had tried to enslave humanity were now facing extinction from creatures that viewed all organic life as nothing more than food. The irony was not lost on anyone. Rick studied the intelligence reports about Zephyrian combat tactics and realized that conventional military strategies were useless against these creatures. The bioships could repair damage instantly by consuming debris from destroyed vessels. They learned from every battle and adapted their defenses to counter any weapon used against them. The Federation military had been designed for conquest and intimidation, not defense against an existential threat. Their rigid command structure and predictable tactics made them easy prey for the Zephyrian swarm intelligence. Entire fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Admiral Marcus Webb received an unexpected communication from Valdris Fleet Commander Nexus requesting immediate assistance. The same alien who had demanded human surrender 6 months earlier was now begging for help against creatures that threatened all life in the galaxy. Marcus faced the most difficult decision of his career. Laura worked with her crew to develop new defensive strategies based on human military doctrine. The key was constant adaptation and unpredictability that would prevent the Zephyrians from learning effective countermeasures. Every battle had to be fought differently, using tactics that had never been tried before. Engineer Carl Baker invented what became known as the human doctrine for military equipment. Instead of building perfect weapons that could not be modified, he designed systems that could be repaired and improved in the field using whatever materials were available. This approach allowed forces to maintain their equipment far from major shipyards. The first joint Human Federation battle occurred in the Vega system, where Zephyrian bioships were consuming the 4th planet. Rick commanded a mixed fleet of human and Valdris vessels using tactics that neither species had attempted before. The cooperation between former enemies amazed everyone involved. The battle began badly when traditional Federation strategies failed completely against the adaptive Zephyrian defenses. The bioships absorbed energy weapon fire and used it to strengthen their organic armor. Standard missile attacks were intercepted by living interceptors that grew from the main vessels during combat. Rick ordered the fleet to switch to human chaos warfare tactics that confused both the Zephyrians and his alien allies. Human ships began ramming biovessels while Valdris crews provided covering fire. The sight of former enemies working together to save a doomed world created bonds that would last for generations. Laura discovered that Zephyrian bioships had one critical weakness. They required time to analyze and adapt to new threats, which meant that constantly changing tactics could overwhelm their defensive systems. The key was never using the same strategy twice in any single engagement. Carl's field modification techniques proved crucial when Federation weapons began failing during extended battles. Human engineers taught alien crews how to repair and improve their equipment, using salvaged materials from destroyed ships. These improvised weapons often worked better than the original designs. The war against the Zephyrian collective lasted for 2 years, with both sides learning from every encounter. Human tactical flexibility combined with Federation technological resources created new possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. The partnership that began from desperation grew into genuine cooperation. Valdris Tactical Officer Nexus worked directly with Rick to coordinate fleet movements during major battles. The alien had initially resented taking orders from humans, but gradually came to respect their innovative thinking and willingness to sacrifice for others. Their friendship became a symbol of the new alliance. Dr. Kevin Walsh studied captured Zephyrian biomatter and discovered that these creatures operated as a single collective consciousness. Individual bioships had no independent thought and could only function as part of the larger organism. This discovery led to new strategies for disrupting their coordination. The breakthrough came when Laura realized that human unpredictability was not just a tactical advantage but a fundamental weapon against collective intelligence. The Zephyrians could adapt to logical strategies, but chaos warfare created too many variables for their collective mind to process effectively. Carl developed specialized weapons designed to exploit Zephyrian weaknesses. These devices used random frequency modulation that prevented the bioships from developing effective countermeasures. The technology was shared freely with Federation forces despite the recent hostilities between their peoples. The tide of war turned during the Battle of Centauri Prime, where Rick coordinated the largest combined fleet in galactic history. Human ships provided tactical leadership, while Federation vessels contributed their superior firepower. The victory saved billions of lives and proved that cooperation was possible between former enemies. Nexus testified before the Federation Council about human behavior during the crisis. He described how human soldiers had shared food and medical supplies with Valdris crews, even while their own people were dying. This testimony convinced many species that humanity deserved a place in galactic civilization. The final phase of the war required unprecedented cooperation between dozens of species that had never worked together before. Rick served as overall tactical coordinator because human chaos warfare had proven most effective against Zephyrian adaptation capabilities. The success of this strategy would determine whether any organic life survived in the galaxy. Laura's relationship with her mixed crew became a model for integration between species. Human and alien officers learned from each other and developed new ideas that neither could have conceived alone. These partnerships would become the foundation for the post-war galactic government that emerged from the ashes of the old Federation. Admiral Steve Jackson stood before the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history as they prepared for the final assault on the Zephyrian homeworld. Ships from dozens of species floated in perfect formation around the massive biostructure that had spawned the creatures threatening all organic life. The fate of every living being in the galaxy would be decided in the next few hours. The Zephyrian home organism was larger than most moons and pulsed with malevolent intelligence that could be felt across space. Tendrils of living matter reached out toward nearby asteroids, consuming them, to fuel the creation of new bioships. Every minute of delay meant more enemy vessels joining the defense of their master. Steve had spent months planning this operation with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The Valdris provided their most powerful warships, while the insectoid Mantari contributed their advanced shielding technology. Even former Federation enemies had joined the alliance when they realized that survival required unity against a common threat. Captain Laura Evans commanded the human tactical squadron that would lead the initial assault. Her ships had been modified with experimental weapons designed specifically to disrupt the collective consciousness that controlled all Zephyrian forces. The technology was untested, but represented their best hope for victory. The battle began with coordinated strikes from every direction as thousands of ships attacked the home organism simultaneously. Energy beams lanced through space while missiles streaked toward their target in waves that seemed to go on forever. The response from the Zephyrians was immediate and devastating. Bioships erupted from the surface of the home organism like antibodies responding to infection. These creatures were larger and more advanced than any previously encountered, with defensive capabilities that absorbed most conventional weapons. The organic vessels moved with fluid grace that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Steve coordinated the massive fleet using human chaos warfare principles adapted for galactic-scale combat. Instead of rigid formations, he divided his forces into independent groups that could adapt to changing battlefield conditions. This flexibility proved crucial when the Zephyrians began deploying weapons that no one had seen before. Laura led her squadron through a maze of living tentacles that tried to ensnare human ships like prey caught in a web. Her pilots used their reputation for impossible maneuvers to dance between the grasping appendages while firing specialized disruption charges at critical neural nodes on the home organism. The breakthrough came when engineer Carl Baker activated his masterpiece weapon. He had spent years developing a device that could generate pure chaos in electronic form. The weapon created random energy patterns that overloaded the collective intelligence, trying to process too many variables at once. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Zephyrian bioships throughout the system began moving erratically as their connection to the home organism was disrupted. Some vessels stopped functioning entirely, while others attacked their own allies in confusion. The coordinated defense that had seemed impossible to break suddenly collapsed into chaos. Steve ordered all forces to press their advantage while the enemy was vulnerable. Human ships led the charge toward the home organism, while Federation vessels provided covering fire. The sight of former enemies working together with perfect coordination amazed observers throughout the galaxy. Dr. Rachel Kim had joined the BAR fleet as scientific advisor and watched the battle from the command center. She realized they were witnessing the birth of a new galactic order, where cooperation replaced conquest as the foundation of interstellar relations. The alliance forged in desperation was becoming something much more important. The final assault required every ship in the fleet to penetrate the defensive barriers surrounding the Zephyrian core. Laura's squadron carved a path through the living defenses while Valdris heavy cruisers followed close behind. The cooperation between human creativity and alien firepower created combinations that neither species could achieve alone. Carl's chaos weapon proved so effective that other species began requesting the technology for their own fleets. The human willingness to share advanced weapons with former enemies demonstrated a level of trust that had never existed in galactic politics. This generosity would be remembered for centuries to come. The home organism began to collapse as its neural networks were overwhelmed by chaotic energy patterns. Bioships throughout the galaxy stopped functioning as their controlling intelligence finally died. The threat that had nearly consumed all organic life was ended by the very chaos that the Zephyrians could not understand or adapt to. Steve received surrender signals from the few remaining Zephyrian vessels that retained independent function. True to human nature, he immediately ordered medical assistance for any survivors rather than allowing them to die. This mercy toward creatures that had tried to devour the galaxy shocked many alien observers. The victory celebration was broadcast across every inhabited world as billions of beings realized they would live to see another day. Human tactical doctrine had saved the galaxy, but it was the alliance between species that made victory possible. No single race could have defeated the Zephyrian threat alone. Ambassador Maria Lopez began negotiations for the new galactic compact that would replace the old Federation system. Instead of conquest and domination, the new government would be based on cooperation and mutual defense. Human diplomatic principles became the foundation for galactic law. Rachel was appointed to lead the new Galactic Science Council, where former enemies would work together to prevent future threats. The sharing of knowledge and technology between species created possibilities that no one had imagined before the war. Scientific advancement accelerated at an unprecedented rate. The human military doctrine became the basis for the new Galactic Defense Force, with officers from every species learning chaos warfare techniques. The unpredictable tactics that had once terrified enemies now protected everyone in the galaxy from external threats. 50 years after the final battle, Rachel stood before the Galactic Assembly to deliver her memorial address. She spoke about how humanity had become both feared and trusted because they possessed the capacity for terrible destruction, combined with unwavering loyalty to their friends. Any species that threatened the innocent would face human wrath, but those who sought peace would find no more reliable allies. The phrase, human-protected space, had become synonymous with safety throughout the galaxy. Pirates and slavers avoided any system under human oversight, while refugees and explorers sought protection under the human flag. This reputation was earned through countless acts of sacrifice and compassion. The galaxy learned that humans were dangerous not because they were cruel, but because they would do anything necessary to protect those they considered family. That family now included every sentient species that had fought alongside them against extinction. The bonds forged in war had created a peace that would endure for generations.